Um, so we start the second half of the semester, and I just want to point out to you that we're changing coffee hour. I hope those of you who have class on Thursday at 2 might not have a class on Mondays at 2. So I hope to see a new lot of you as well as the old lot. Common Grounds is upstairs in this building, and I can't describe to you how to get there. But if you go there and walk in a circle, you will ultimately arrive. And if you have the misfortune of getting the wrong elevator, it will make you go all the way around, but you'll find it, and it's very pleasant. So we'll have a few more visitors this second part than the first part. We're going to be turning, especially near the end of the semester, to sort of specific contemporary issues, like the issue, for example, of crime and the issue of immigration. We'll have experts in those areas come in and talk to us about them. There'll be much more dealing with the United States and human rights here, rather than human rights internationally, which has had to be our focus for the first half of the course. I know that all of you are thinking there's too much reading. I did make a few cuts. I'm trying. All I can say to you is that I'm hoping that you're learning to read these texts a little more selectively. One of your numbers, Vish, suggested I give you a lecture on how to read. It's hard to give you a whole lecture on how to read. But the point is, of course, I'm not asking you to memorize or even begin to memorize every chapter in the papal encyclical Peace on Earth. What's important for me is that you understand that a liberalizing force in the Catholic Church is interesting in articulating a set of human rights ideas that we've come to associate with secular human rights in a natural law and theological context, and that becomes part of the international human rights conversation. And you don't have to read every word in detail. If you spend a half an hour reading it, you'll get it. So I know it's hard. I know it's a skill to learn to read history, and it's very different than learning to read philosophy or learning to read lyric poetry or learning to read organic chemistry. But I hope you're getting there. And if you want more specific instructions, you come on my office hours. Okay? So any just general questions before we start? No. Okay. So we start, in some sense, a new part of the course because we're going to deal with what I think is the foundational document in modern human rights politics and discussion, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, passed by the United Nations on December 10, 1948. Posted for its 60th birthday. So let me just give you something of the background. But first, let me give you what I want to make the argument for this lecture. So what I want to say is that I think it's a mistake, and I hope some of your documents, especially the document about the Bandung Conference, makes it clear. It's a mistake to see the Declaration as a Western imposition on the rest of the world, or as a dead letter because of all the ways in which it's been violated. I think that misses the big point, and the big point is this: that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights grew out of a great plurality of interests in the world, a world that's long lived with interpenetrating legal, economic, philosophical, and cultural ideas. As I say, it's not a Western world with ideas about human rights and everybody else with no ideas about human rights. The fact that you, this very ethnically diverse group of students, are here in Berkeley attests to the fact that we live in an intellectually and culturally and economically interconnected world, and have lived in such a world for a long time. I think there's as much difference between people within the so-called West as there is between East and West and between North and South. So what I want to suggest to you is that the Universal Declaration is, in fact and in law, a framework for a new kind of politics. it's developed not as sort of a new deal for the world. In other words, it's not a specific legislative program that one can put in place as one put the New Deal in place with banking reform and with Social Security that actually has legislative import in every country. But I think it has become the sort of locus for a network of causes and projects and institutions of various sorts that are linked by human rights ideas and human rights practices. So one of the things we'll be talking about as the course goes on is the ways in which Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International and all sorts of organizations, many of which I'm sure you all belong to or work in, articulate with this Universal Declaration. So it's a framework, it's aspirational, it also has legal foundations, legal implications as we learned last time. And I think it speaks not just to the interest of some of its Western authors, that some of the authors came from other parts of the world, but I think to a passionate belief also in third world leaders, as articulated at the Baldo Conference, which you've read, and it's articulated in the Catholic Church, and it's articulated in many other places, to the aspirational ideas of this document. So I do think it's a sort of I'm not sure I want to say actually founding moment, because many of its ideas go back to the 1920s, and as you'll see, they also go back to the Enlightenment in different contexts. But it's a rather remarkable document. So what I want to say then finally is that the Declaration and the subsequent discussion doesn't subsist within some relativist discourse, though that there is a relativist discourse. It has been attacked as part of an anti-colonial critique. You read that in Fanon, but I don't think it distracts from its truly universal claims. And insofar as it's not universal, I think the debates come from many different areas. So I'm trying to give you a bunch of documents which sort of position this. We have the Fanon critique, we have the Baldo Conference argument for it, we have the document itself, and I hope that those let you sort of triangulate different views. You have the document itself. So what I'm going to try to tell you today is about the document itself, its historical place, and why I think it's of some significance. Sorry.
Sorry.
Back. Okay. You know, I'm not sure we're not better off. In the old days, you guys could have bought something called Black Lightning notes. There's some where students hired notes that are technology. They have some students where your notes are away. But all right. So let's see. Does this work? Yes. Do you hear me? Okay. Are we okay? Yeah. All right. So let's go back. You can see the origins of this document. That is to say, the founders themselves, the writers, the authors themselves, found the origins of this document in some of the ideas of the Enlightenment. And I think that should be clear to you. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights speaks, of course, to the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, the Declaration of Independence, a bunch of Enlightenment documents that you are by now familiar with. There's one that we haven't really discussed much at all, Kant's work on perpetual peace. What Kant proposes, actually, is a secular version of something which had been, in many religions, a messianic hope for peace and human understanding at some point. So the Jewish Bible puts this: they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. That's the notion, that idea, and most religious traditions have that idea, is that at some point, with the coming of the Messiah, with the coming of in some ways of godliness into the world, there will be peace and there will be human understanding. So Kant's version of this is a secular account of this, that we don't wait for the coming of the Messiah, or for enlightenment in a spiritual sense, but we see this institutionally. So what Kant argues in this Perpetual Peace is to say, under some set of circumstances, nations and peoples can live in peace. So he argues that there should be no secret treaties, that no large states should try to dominate small states or get small states by exchange or purchase in the way the states were dealt with in the old days. He was against standing armies. He was against national debt for fighting wars, which many Enlightenment figures were against. And civilly, he argued that certain kinds of constitutions, certain kinds of governments were less likely to go to war. So he was for republican forms of government rather than monarchical forms of government, or absolutist states. He argued for the idea of world citizenship, at least in the sense of world hospitality. Not everybody should be a citizen, can be a citizen everywhere and enjoy all those political rights, but the world owed everybody at least the concept of hospitality. That is, to be treated as one would treat a guest. So this sort of document is unspecific, it's utopian in some sense, it's clearly aspirational, had no field things in war, but it's an important document in the sense that it inspired both the founders of the League of Nations in 1920 and the authors of the UN Charter in the idea that there was a secular institutional means to which one might actually reduce the violence of war and increase the chances of humans living with dignity. And again, it doesn't make any, I don't know enough to talk about these kinds of aspirational notions in other cultures, but I am going to put an article up for you that's not required about the sort of Muslim tradition of thinking about human rights, which I just read in Journal of Human Rights. So you'll see that it's not just the West, versions of this exist in other legal and philosophical traditions. Okay, so that's the next stage in this, in its secular history, is 1919 with the founding of the League of Nations. Now, the League of Nations was founded, as you all probably know, as part of the treaty which ended the First World War, the Treaty of Versailles. Founded in 1919, it did have some successes. I don't want to speak about the League of Nations in itself and why it failed, but I want to just put this on notice that there is another institutional effort to deal with these kind of issues that we're dealing about in 45 and 48. And the writers in 45 and 48 were keenly aware of why they thought the earlier one failed. One reason it failed was the United States never joined. By this time, probably the great world power. Second reason, it had no strong Security Council, and so no efforts to sort of mobilize through this institution force in order to stop some action which contravened the charter of this organization. So, in some sense, when Italy invaded Abyssinia, Ethiopia in 1936, and no one did anything, and no one had the means to do anything, it was clear it was pretty much a dead letter in the sense that the international community would do anything to prevent what was clearly an aggressive and in many ways genocidal war. We don't need to talk about why it failed. It finally ended officially in 1946, though it meant very little after the late 1930s. But the point for you is that when we talk about the beginning of this international human rights conversation, it's a conversation which intellectually goes back, I think,